Have you ever felt like something is missing, even when everything looks good in your life? Siddhartha had respect, knowledge, and a bright future. But still, he wasn't happy. So one day he left everything behind, his home, his family, even his best friend, to find real peace. On his journey, he meets rich people like poor people, wise teachers, even the great Buddha. But he doesn't follow anyone. He keeps searching. What was he trying to find? And did he ever find it? This story will surprise you, touch your heart, and maybe even change how you see your own life. In the quiet beauty of ancient India, where the river shimmered under the morning sun and the air was filled with the sound of chants and prayers, lived a young boy named Siddhartha. He was the son of a respected Brahmin, born into wisdom, tradition, and a life already mapped out. People saw greatness in him. His father taught him sacred verses, and the elders praised his sharp mind, his calm nature, and the way he seemed older than his age. Everyone believed he would become a great spiritual leader, maybe even wiser than his teachers. But inside Siddhartha, something didn't feel right. He had learned everything his teachers could offer. He knew the rituals, the holy words, the rules of life, but none of it touched his soul. He didn't feel peace, not truly. When he meditated, when he listened to the wise men speak, when he repeated the ancient verses, something was missing. A voice inside him whispered that the answers he was searching for couldn't be found in words written by others. He began to wonder, how can anyone teach what they themselves haven't experienced? Even his best friend Govinda saw this spark in Siddhartha, a restlessness, a fire. Govinda admired him deeply, followed him like a shadow, trusted every word he said. And when Siddhartha looked at the world, the rituals, the offerings, the quiet lives of the Brahmins, he couldn't help but feel trapped in a life built by others. A beautiful cage, but still, a cage. He dreamed of something deeper, not just to learn about the self, but to truly know it. Not to repeat someone else's wisdom, but to discover his own truth. That desire started to grow stronger every day, like a river that refuses to be still. And so, one evening, as the sun melted behind the trees and the birds returned to their nests, Siddhartha made a decision. A bold, dangerous decision. He would leave everything, his father, his home, the safe path everyone believed he should follow, and step into the unknown. Because something inside him told him, peace cannot be given, it must be found. And his journey was just about to begin. That night, Siddhartha spoke to his father. Quietly, respectfully, but with a fire in his eyes. He said he wanted to leave, to follow the path of the wandering samanas, a group of monks who owned nothing, lived in forests, and searched for truth through pain, hunger, and silence. His father was heartbroken. How could a son of a Brahmin leave the sacred path to join beggars and wanderers? But when he saw Siddhartha standing there, silent but unshakable, he understood. This boy would not be stopped. And so, with tears hidden in his heart, the father let his son go. Siddhartha walked away, and Govinda walked with him. Together they found the samanas, thin, quiet, almost like shadows. They lived under trees, begged for food, slept on cold ground, and gave up everything, even their names, their desires, their pasts. Siddhartha didn't just watch them. He became one of them. He learned to fast until his body trembled. He learned to silence his thoughts until only emptiness remained. He pushed his mind beyond pain, beyond time, beyond self. But as the months passed, something strange happened. The emptiness brought him no peace. He could leave his body, quiet his hunger, forget his name. But still, that quiet voice inside whispered, "This isn't it either." He saw old samanas who had walked this path for years, and yet their eyes were still searching. Had they found truth, or just escaped the noise of the world? Siddhartha began to feel that escaping the world wasn't the same as understanding it. Running from desire wasn't the same as overcoming it. And one day a rumor spread. A great teacher had arrived in a nearby forest. A man who had reached enlightenment. A man called Gautama, the Buddha. Siddhartha's heart stirred. Maybe this was the one who had truly found the path. Maybe this was the one who could finally show him the truth he had been searching for all along. And with that, Siddhartha and Govinda prepared to meet the man who had shaken the world, the one who claimed to be awake. The forest was alive with whispers. People from faraway lands had come, just to hear him speak, the Buddha. A man said to be glowing with peace, with silence, with something no one could explain, but everyone could feel. Siddhartha and Govinda joined the crowd. They didn't rush. They watched. And then they saw him. He was not a god, not a king, just a man in a yellow robe, walking calmly, slowly, like every step was a prayer. But there was something in his face, so still, so clear, like a river that had nothing left to hide. Siddhartha looked at him and thought, yes, this one has found what I'm looking for. They listened to the Buddha's words. He spoke of suffering, of letting go, of waking up from the dream of life. His voice was calm, without pride or fear. And when he finished, the people sat in silence, as if time itself had stopped to listen. Govinda was moved. His eyes were shining. He said, "This is it. I want to follow him. I want to be his student." Siddhartha smiled softly, proud of his friend's choice, but inside he felt something different, something quiet but firm. He asked to speak with the Buddha alone. With deep respect, he told him, "You have reached the truth. I believe it. I see it in you. But I must find it my own way." Siddhartha explained that while teachings can guide, they cannot replace the path one must walk alone. Truth isn't a lesson, it's a journey. And no matter how perfect the words, they are still someone else's words. The Buddha listened, without anger, without praise. He only said, "You are wise, young man, but be careful of your own cleverness." As Siddhartha walked away, something had changed. He felt both empty and free. He had lost his friend, Govinda had stayed behind. But he had gained something else, a new kind of silence. Not the silence of fasting or meditating, but the silence of beginning. For the first time in his life, Siddhartha had no teacher, no plan, no system to follow, only himself and the path ahead. He walked alone now. The forest behind him held memories, of chants, of hunger, of teachings that once felt sacred but now felt like echoes. Siddhartha didn't feel lost. In fact, for the first time he felt awake. As the sun touched the trees and the wind brushed against his skin, everything looked different. Brighter, deeper, more alive. He realized something powerful. He had spent years trying to escape life, through prayers, silence, teachers, even suffering. But maybe the truth wasn't in escaping. Maybe it was in living. Not just watching life from far away, but touching it, feeling it, experiencing it fully. He looked at the world with new eyes. The birds didn't need holy books to sing. The river didn't need lessons to flow. Trees stood tall without knowing any scriptures. And in that simple beauty, Siddhartha saw something sacred, something real. He began to laugh, softly at first, then louder. Not with madness, but with joy. A joy that came from inside, not from a god or a teacher or a book. It was the joy of being just being, of seeing the world not as a puzzle to solve, but as a mystery to live. He had been a Brahmin's son, a samana, a seeker of teachers, and now he was none of those things. No name, no title, just Siddhartha. A man who had begun to wake up from the dream of rules and roles and had stepped into something deeper. He didn't know where the road would take him, but for the first time he wasn't afraid. He didn't need a map. He only needed to keep walking, eyes open, heart open, and let life itself become the teacher. The search was far from over, but the boy who had once repeated other people's words had now started listening to the voice within. And that voice was finally speaking. The road led him to the city, a place loud with trade, laughter, perfumes, and gold. For a man who had spent years in silence and hunger, the noise was strange, almost dizzying. But Siddhartha didn't flinch. He watched it all with quiet eyes, like a child seeing the world for the first time. That's when he saw her. A woman, graceful like the moon, dressed in silk, walking with the confidence of a queen. Her name was Kamala. She wasn't a holy woman. She didn't speak of gods or the soul. But in her presence, Siddhartha felt something stir. Not the hunger of the body alone, but a curiosity, a lesson he hadn't learned before. She had power, charm, wisdom, and she knew how to live in the world, not run from it. He wanted to learn from her. But Kamala didn't give her attention for free. She told Siddhartha he needed fine clothes, clean shoes, money, and success, things he had never cared about before. So for the first time, Siddhartha stepped fully into the world. He found work with a wealthy merchant, learned to trade, to speak with charm, to count coins and understand people. Slowly, he learned the ways of the city, how to dress, how to impress, how to win. And Kamala became his guide, not through silence and meditation, but through love, beauty, and desire. They shared moments that were both tender and deep. She taught him about the pleasure of the senses, about balance, control, and giving without losing the self. Siddhartha was no longer a seeker of emptiness. He was now a student of life in full color. But even as he smiled and grew successful, a soft voice inside remained, quiet, waiting, watching. Something told him this too was part of the journey, but not the end. Time moved quietly, like the slow turning of a wheel. Siddhartha now lived like many others, with fine clothes, a house, and respect. He walked through the city not as a monk or a seeker, but as a successful man. He understood money, made deals, gave advice, and watched his wealth grow. People admired him. They trusted him. They wanted to be him. But Siddhartha, he had changed. Outwardly, he smiled. Inwardly, something began to ache. He started to notice how the same things that once felt new, gold coins, soft beds, sweet wine, soft laughter, had slowly lost their taste. He was no longer hungry, but he wasn't full either. Something was slipping away. And he knew it. He watched himself in silence, how his mind had grown restless, how small things now made him angry, how he laughed less and sighed more. He had learned the games of the world, played them well, and won. But with every win, something inside him lost. He remembered the days under the trees beside the river, when a simple breeze brought joy. Now the quiet felt heavy. The same man who once sat still for hours now tossed and turned in his sleep. Kamala noticed the change too. She saw the way his eyes didn't shine like before. The way his hands, once graceful, now trembled slightly when alone. He was surrounded by comfort, yet a stranger to peace. One night, after playing a game of dice for far too long, Siddhartha stared at the floor and felt a deep emptiness rise from within. Not a passing sadness, but a truth he could no longer ignore. He had become what he once questioned. He was living a life that looked full, but felt hollow. And just like he had once walked away from the teachings of the Brahmins, he knew it was time to walk away again. Not because he hated the world, but because he was ready to find something real. Something that no gold, no kiss, no game could ever offer. Before sunrise, without a word to anyone, Siddhartha walked away. He left behind the fine clothes, the gold, the crowded streets, and even Kamala, not out of anger or regret, but because he knew his soul was drowning. He had tasted everything the world could offer, and found it sweet at first, but bitter in the end. The same hands that once held wisdom now felt empty. The man who had once fasted, meditated, and laughed under the trees had forgotten how to breathe. He wandered aimlessly, no longer young, no longer full of hope. The wind felt cold against his face. His steps were heavy, like he was dragging years behind him. The voice inside that once guided him had gone quiet. He came to a river, the same river he had crossed many years ago. Tired and broken, he sat by its edge and stared into the water. Thoughts filled his mind like a storm. Regret, shame, loneliness. Had he failed? Had he gone in circles? Was all of it meaningless? A thought crossed his mind, dark and silent. What if he let the river take him? What if he slipped into the water and disappeared, leaving behind the confusion, the noise, the weight of a life that had gone nowhere? But then, as he leaned forward, he heard something. A sound. Soft. Endless. A single word carried by the river like a whisper from the soul of the earth. That sound, full, eternal, whole, touched something deep inside him. It was like the river was speaking, not in words, but in truth. And Siddhartha remembered who he was, who he had been, and why he had begun this journey. He lay down by the river, closed his eyes, and for the first time in many years, he slept in peace. Not as a merchant, not as a lover, not as a seeker, just as a man who had let go, completely. And in that letting go, something new was waiting to be born. When he woke, the world felt new. The trees whispered gently, the sky looked endless, and the river beside him flowed like time itself, calm, patient, eternal. Siddhartha sat quietly, watching the water move. It didn't rush, it didn't resist, it simply flowed, forward and back, past and present, all at once. And in that quiet flow, he felt something return. Not pride, not excitement, but stillness. Beside the river, he met a familiar face. The old ferryman who had once helped him cross many years ago. The man had changed little, his face carved by time, his eyes soft and deep. Without question, he welcomed Siddhartha, offered him food, a place to rest, and silence. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Siddhartha stayed. He no longer searched for wealth, pleasure, or teachings. He helped with the boat, watched the water, listened to the wind. Days passed like breath, no longer counted, no longer chased. He began to feel what he had never felt before, peace not as an idea, but as a way of being. The river became his teacher. It showed him how to listen, how to wait, how to understand without needing to speak. He began to notice that the river was never just water. It was a mirror. It carried the laughter of children, the tears of the broken, the ashes of the dead, the joy of lovers. It held all of life, and it held it without judgment. Siddhartha watched and listened, and in time he saw something beautiful, that nothing is lost, that everything returns, that every end is part of a beginning. He no longer wanted to become someone great. He only wanted to be fully alive. And by the river he had found what no temple, no teacher, no gold had ever given him. Not answers, but understanding. The days passed quietly, like soft ripples across the river. Siddhartha stayed with the ferryman, not as a guest, but as a friend, as a student of silence. The ferryman's name was Vasudeva, and though he spoke very little, there was a peaceful glow in his presence, like the river had poured its wisdom into him. They worked together, guiding people from one shore to the other, rich and poor, joyful and grieving, young and old. All passed through the boat. Siddhartha saw their faces, heard their laughter, their silence, their stories. And still the river flowed, carrying them all, holding them all. He began to notice what Vasudeva had long understood. The river was not just water. It had a soul, a voice, a rhythm that spoke of life's deepest truths. It didn't rush. It didn't resist. It allowed everything. And yet, it always moved forward. Siddhartha watched it for hours. Sometimes the river laughed, sometimes it cried, sometimes it was silent. But in every sound, in every wave, there was something sacred. Vasudeva never tried to teach. He only listened, to the river, to people, to the world. And slowly, Siddhartha learned to do the same. Not by asking questions, but by simply being present. In that stillness, Siddhartha began to see patterns he had missed before. He saw that time wasn't a straight line. Everything was connected, birth and death, joy and sorrow, gain and loss. Just like the river, life bent and twisted, returned to itself, and flowed on. He felt himself becoming lighter, not with excitement, but with calm. There was no longer a need to become anything. The journey had brought him not to a destination, but to understanding. And in the silence between each wave, he felt something rise within him, not the voice of a seeker, but the quiet strength of someone who had finally arrived. One morning, a visitor arrived at the riverbank, not to cross but to stay. Kamala. Her face had aged, but her presence was still graceful, still full of quiet strength, and beside her, a boy, her son, Siddhartha's son. Kamala had been traveling to see the Buddha, but fate had led her here, to this river, to Siddhartha. Her journey had been long and hard, and her body had grown weak. Not long after arriving, she collapsed. Siddhartha held her gently in his arms as she took her final breath, and in that moment, something in him broke and opened. He had lost her, the woman who had once taught him love, but she had left behind a gift, a son he had never known. The boy was angry, confused, silent. He had grown up in comfort in a city, surrounded by servants and soft things, and now suddenly, he was living by a river with a father he barely knew. No gold, no games, no friends, no freedom. Siddhartha tried to love him. He was patient, gentle, offering kindness instead of rules. But the boy pushed back. He refused to speak. He refused to help. His eyes were full of fire, and his heart was locked shut. Still, Siddhartha waited, hoping, praying the boy would see, would feel, would understand. But one morning the boy was gone. He had run away. Back toward the city, back toward noise, money, and everything Siddhartha had once left behind. The pain cut deep, deeper than anything he had felt. Siddhartha had lost people before, teachers, friends, lovers, but losing his son was different. This pain didn't come from ego, it came from love. For days, he stood by the river, searching the water for answers. And slowly, gently, the river whispered to him again, just as it had before. It taught him that love must let go, that trying to hold on too tightly only creates more pain, that every soul must walk its own path, even if it leads to suffering. Siddhartha wept, but not in bitterness. He wept in understanding. He saw himself in his son, the same rebellion, the same fire, the same need to discover life on his own terms. And he knew the river would bring his boy what he needed, just as it had brought Siddhartha here. All he could do now was wait and trust. The days passed, the seasons shifted. Siddhartha remained by the river, not just as a ferryman, but as a soul in stillness. He no longer searched for truth, because now truth flowed through him like the river itself. One evening, as he sat beside Vasudeva, watching the water shimmer in the golden light, something changed. The silence around them became music. Not a sound, not a voice, but a presence, a feeling. In that silence, Siddhartha heard it. Om. Not a word, not a chant, but a vibration that pulsed through the trees, the wind, the sky, and his very breath. Om. The sacred sound of unity, the merging of all things, the beginning and the end, the joy and the sorrow, the seeker and the truth. In that moment, Siddhartha didn't just understand the river. He became it. He saw all his past lives flow into one stream. The restless boy, the proud Brahmin, the silent Samana, the wealthy lover, the broken father, all of it led to now, to peace, to presence, to Om. Vasudeva, the ferryman, watched quietly. His work was done. He had guided Siddhartha to the other shore, not just of the river, but of life. And so, without a word, Vasudeva walked into the forest and never returned. But Siddhartha didn't feel loss. He felt fullness, because now the river spoke through him. Now the silence wasn't empty. It was everything. Om wasn't something to chant. It was something to become. The sun was setting once again, casting a golden hue across the river that had seen so much: joy, sorrow, loss, love, and now peace. Years had passed. One day, a familiar figure arrived at the riverbank. Tired eyes, wrinkled face, dressed in the robes of a monk. It was Govinda, still searching, still wandering, still hoping to find what his heart had longed for since youth. Truth, enlightenment, meaning. He didn't recognize the man sitting calmly by the river. Not at first. "Can you help me, ferryman?" Govinda asked. "I have followed Gautama all my life, but still I seek." Siddhartha smiled gently. "You have always been a seeker, my friend." Govinda paused. That voice, that face, his heart skipped. Siddhartha? The old friends looked into each other's eyes, two souls shaped by time, walking different paths, yet tied by something deeper. Govinda was overwhelmed. "You found it, didn't you? Peace. The truth I've been chasing." Siddhartha didn't explain. He didn't teach. Instead, he invited Govinda to look. "Place your lips upon my forehead, my friend," Siddhartha whispered, "and see what I see." Govinda, confused but trusting, leaned in. And in that single touch, he saw a river flowing endlessly, a child's laughter, a mother's tears, a warrior's rage, a lover's kiss. Birth, death, joy, suffering. All moments, not separate but one. Time disappeared. The illusion broke. Govinda's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of awakening. He didn't need words anymore. The truth wasn't something to chase. It had always been there, waiting in stillness. He looked at Siddhartha, now glowing with something beyond light, something eternal. And he finally understood. This was the end, and also the beginning. Siddhartha had walked the full circle. Not as a teacher, not as a monk, but as a man who had simply listened to the river, to life, to his own heart. And now Govinda had heard it too. The journey was complete. And so, under the golden glow of a setting sun, two old souls sat by the river, not as seeker and ferryman, but as brothers, as one. Govinda's tears weren't from pain anymore. They were from understanding. He had finally seen what Siddhartha had known. That truth is not taught, it is lived. That enlightenment doesn't arrive with noise, but with stillness, with surrender, with love. That Om, the sound of the universe, isn't out there. It's been within us all along. Just like Siddhartha, we are all travelers, through chaos, through desire, through confusion, hoping to arrive somewhere that feels like home. And maybe, just maybe, home isn't a place. Maybe it's a moment, like this one. Maybe it's a story, like Siddhartha's. Maybe it's right here, in you. If this story touched your heart, if even a single scene made you pause and reflect, then don't let it end here. There are many more journeys waiting for you. Tap the links in the description to watch our other powerful book summaries. Every story has a lesson, and every lesson brings us closer to who we truly are. And tell us in the comments, which book do you want us to summarize next? Your voice matters. Your choice could inspire the next soul on this path. Like this video if you felt connected. Subscribe and hit the bell icon. because every week we bring stories that don't just inform, they transform. Until next time, listen closely, like the river, because life is always speaking.